Leela thought this year would finally give her one moment of brightness, a front row ticket to the concert she had dreamed about since childhood. It wasn't just a show, it was the first thing that had made her feel alive after months of being overlooked. But the moment she walked into her sister's house, everything shattered. Her ticket, the one gift she received with her own name on it, had been taken from her, just handed away. And in that small, cruel moment, Leela understood something painful. In her own family's eyes, she had never mattered. But this time, she wasn't going to break. This time, she was going to rise. Leela walked home that evening with a heavy and confused heart. The moment her sister took the concert ticket still replayed in her mind like a painful echo. She had waited weeks for that night, imagining herself sitting in the front row, letting the music lift her out of a year that felt dull and draining. It was supposed to be the first good moment she allowed herself after months of feeling ignored. But instead of excitement, she was handed another reminder that she was never the priority in her own family. Mara's careless words kept circling in her thoughts. "We gave your ticket to my mom." No apology, no hesitation, no sense of how much it meant to her. Her mother had only smiled softly, saying the children were excited, as if Leela's feelings mattered less than everyone else's. No one defended her, no one asked how she felt, and no one even noticed her silence. It felt as if she had been pushed out of the picture entirely. When she reached her apartment and closed the door behind her, the quiet felt both comforting and painful. She sat down slowly, letting the reality sink in. For a moment, she felt the familiar ache of being overlooked, the same ache she had carried since childhood. But then something inside her shifted. She realized she was tired of shrinking, tired of pretending she was fine, tired of being the quiet sister who accepted every insult without speaking up. In that silence, she made a promise to herself. She would not break this time. Leela decided she would rise, not through anger or dramatic arguments, but through steady change. She would rebuild herself piece by piece. She would grow stronger, calmer, and more confident, until the people who ignored her had no choice but to see her. She would not fight Mara directly. She would not beg for respect. She would create a life that demanded it. Over the next days, she began making small changes. She focused on her work, giving each task careful attention. She started visiting the gym, building strength she had ignored for years. She slept earlier, ate better, and began taking care of herself in a way she had forgotten. Every step was quiet, but every step mattered. Her coworkers noticed first. One of them smiled at her and said, "You look different these days." Leela simply nodded, keeping the deeper truth to herself. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was trying to discover who she could become when she stopped hiding. But she knew this transformation was only the beginning. Mara had always relied on her reputation, her charm, and the family's admiration. So Leela made another decision. She would step into the same world Mara controlled. She would show up, stay calm, stay kind, and let her presence speak for itself. She didn't want to embarrass her sister. She just wanted to stop disappearing. And slowly, the people around her began to see her. At gatherings, she listened carefully, spoke gently, and helped whenever she could. She didn't try to outshine anyone, yet her sincerity drew quiet attention. Her nieces and nephews began sitting next to her more often. The adults who once ignored her now asked for her opinion. These small moments felt like tiny victories, not over Mara, but over the old version of herself. Still, deep inside her, she remembered the ticket. She remembered the humiliation of being dismissed, the sting of hearing she wouldn't have appreciated the concert anyway. Those words had hurt, but they also pushed her to grow. They reminded her that she deserved more than the role she had been given. One evening, while getting ready for a family event, she looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked steady, sure, and quietly confident. For the first time in years, she felt in control of her own life. She wasn't seeking revenge. She wasn't trying to hurt Mara. She was rising for herself. But as she walked out the door, she knew one thing for certain. Mara would eventually notice the change, and she would not know how to handle it. Leela arrived at the family gathering with a quiet, steady confidence. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, but the moment she entered the room, people paused. Something about her presence had shifted. Her posture was straighter, her eyes calmer, and her energy grounded. Even her clothes were simple yet elegant, as if she had finally learned to choose things that made her feel like herself. It wasn't loud confidence. It was the type that settles in and stays. Her mother noticed first. "Leela, you look different today," she said, her voice unsure. Leela smiled politely. "Just taking better care of myself." She didn't offer more, and her mother didn't know how to respond. For years, Leela had been the one who blended into the background, the one who made space for everyone else. Seeing her now, standing tall and composed, felt unfamiliar to them. Some family members welcomed it with warm smiles. Others watched with quiet curiosity. And Mara? Mara froze for a moment when she saw her. It wasn't dramatic, just a subtle stiffness in her shoulders, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. She approached Leela with her usual sweet, practiced voice. "You look nice today," she said, the compliment sharp around the edges. "Thank you," Leela replied simply. She didn't shrink, didn't over-explain, didn't act grateful for basic respect. Mara noticed the difference immediately. For someone like her, confidence in others felt threatening. She preferred people to stay predictable, especially her younger sister. Throughout the evening, Leela stayed calm and thoughtful. She helped in the kitchen, chatted with the children, and answered questions with gentle clarity. She didn't try to win attention, yet her sincerity naturally drew people toward her. Slowly, she became part of conversations she was usually excluded from. People asked her opinions, laughed at her subtle humor, and appreciated her presence. And every time someone turned to her instead of Mara, a tiny crack formed in Mara's carefully built image. At one point, Mara pulled her aside. "So, what's going on with you lately? New job? New boyfriend?" "No," Leela said softly. "Just becoming myself." The answer unsettled Mara. She preferred explanations she could control, something she could mock or dismiss, but this quiet transformation wasn't something she could categorize. It wasn't loud enough to attack, yet strong enough to be impossible to ignore. The evening continued, and Leela noticed something she had never seen before. Her absence no longer felt invisible. Her presence mattered. Not because she forced it, but because she finally believed she deserved to be seen. Near the end of the gathering, her mother handed out small gifts for the children. Leela watched the joyful chaos with a warm smile. Then, out of nowhere, one of the kids tugged at her sleeve. "Auntie, sit with us. We like when you tell stories." She sat with them on the carpet, telling simple tales, adding small twists that made them giggle. Other adults noticed how calm and loving she was with the children, how naturally she connected with them. Someone whispered, "She has changed in the best way." Mara heard it, and her face tightened. For the first time, Leela realized something important. Her growth wasn't just about healing. It was shifting the balance in the family, a balance Mara had always controlled. When the gathering ended, Leela walked out feeling lighter. She didn't need applause, didn't need anyone to validate her. She just felt peaceful. She was building herself quietly, step by step. And she knew this was only the beginning, because soon the real test would come, when her strength would clash directly with her sister's insecurities. Leela walked home slowly, holding the empty envelope like a useless piece of paper. The streetlights hummed above her, and every step felt heavier than the last. For years she had stayed silent, accepting whatever people handed to her, even when it hurt. But tonight, Something sharp and clear formed inside her chest, like a small flame refusing to die. She kept thinking about how easily her sister had taken the ticket, how naturally her mother had agreed, and how no one had even looked at her face before deciding what she supposedly didn't need. At home, the quiet felt strange. Usually she found comfort there, but now the silence seemed to ask why she never defended herself. She sat on her bed and stared at the cracked paint on the wall, remembering all the small moments she had ignored. Her sister taking her clothes without asking, her mother telling her to give up her turn, relatives praising her sister while saying Leela was too calm, too soft, too easy. Maybe she had been easy. Maybe that was why people thought they could walk over her life the same way someone wipes dust off a table. She opened her drawer and took out the concert brochure she had saved for months. It still smelled faintly of the store where she had bought it. She touched the picture on the cover and let out a slow breath. It wasn't about the show anymore. It was about finally choosing herself. She had worked extra shifts, saved quietly, and hoped quietly. But why should she live quietly? Why should she accept a life where her joy was always the first thing to be sacrificed? Leela stood up and looked in the mirror. Her eyes were tired, but there was something new in them. A steadiness she didn't recognize. She wasn't angry anymore. She was awake. And that awakening reminded her of all the times she'd stepped aside so others could walk forward. She remembered birthdays where her gifts were forgotten, school events where her achievements were dismissed, arguments where she apologized first to keep peace. She realized peace had never existed. Only silence had. She walked to the window and watched the city lights flicker in the distance. Somewhere in that wide world, people were choosing themselves every day, fighting for the smallest moments of happiness. If they could do it, why couldn't she? Why should she accept a life where she always came last? Leela picked up her phone and checked the concert website. Most tickets were sold out, but there were still a few seats left, far from the ones she originally had, but still inside the arena. Her heart thumped. Buying it again would hurt her savings, but losing herself would cost even more. She pressed the purchase button with a trembling hand, feeling like she was stepping into a new version of her life. When the confirmation email arrived, she smiled quietly. Not because of the ticket, but because for the first time in years, she had chosen something for herself without waiting for permission. A strange courage settled inside her, like a new kind of warmth spreading through her ribs. She didn't know what the next day would bring, or what her family would say when they discovered she had gone alone. But she knew one thing with complete clarity. The girl who walked into her sister's house earlier that day was not the same girl who now stood in her small room. Something had shifted. Something had begun. And this time, she wasn't going back. The next morning, Leela woke up before sunrise. Her room was still dim, the air cool, the world quiet in a way that made her feel like she was standing on the edge of something new. She sat up slowly, feeling a calm she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the loud, excited kind of confidence. It was softer, steadier, like the gentle rhythm of water shaping stone over time. She realized, though she didn't need to announce her strength to anyone, she just needed to live it. She got ready for work and tied her hair back, noticing how her hands weren't shaking the way they usually did after a bad day. Something had settled inside her, a decision, a boundary, a beginning. As she stepped outside, the early morning breeze brushed her face, carrying that quiet sense of possibility. At work, she moved through tasks with unusual focus. Her coworker Sana noticed and asked, "You okay today? You look different." Leela smiled softly. "Maybe I'm learning to be." Sana didn't push for details, but her warm nod felt like a small confirmation from the universe. Throughout the day, Leela kept thinking about the ticket, the moment she bought it again, the way she had chosen herself. It still felt strange to imagine going alone to something she once dreamed of sharing with people she loved. But maybe being alone wasn't a punishment. Maybe it was freedom. During her lunch break, She opened her phone and saw 10 missed messages from her sister. Short ones, long ones, voice notes, all carrying the same message. Where is the ticket? Why isn't your code working? What's wrong with you? Leela stared at the screen for a long moment. The old version of her would have answered immediately, trying to explain, trying to keep peace, trying to make everyone comfortable while she swallowed her own pain. But now she simply turned the phone over and placed it face down on the table. She didn't owe anyone an explanation for choosing herself. When she returned home in the evening, her family was waiting. Her sister stood in the living room with arms crossed, her mother behind her, both wearing the familiar expression, the one that said Leela had already done something wrong. She braced herself, not for the argument, but for something deeper, the test of her new boundaries. Her sister stepped forward. Where's the ticket? Why isn't it working? I took it for Rhea because she deserves to go more than you. Just send me the code again. Leela's heartbeat slowed. It didn't race or panic like before. She took a small breath, letting her words rise gently from her chest. It was my ticket. I already told you that. Her sister scoffed. Stop being dramatic. Just give me the code. Leela didn't raise her voice. She didn't shake. She simply said, no. The room went still. Even her mother blinked, surprised. They weren't used to this version of her, the one who didn't fold immediately, the one who didn't apologize for wanting something. Her mother frowned. Leela, why are you behaving like this? You never caused trouble. And there it was, the sentence that held her whole life inside it. The quiet expectation that her worth came from never needing anything, never asking for anything, never taking space. She looked at her mother calmly. I'm not causing trouble. I'm just choosing myself. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of her words settled into the room, rewriting invisible rules that had shaped her since childhood. Her sister threw her hands up and stormed away, complaining loudly. Her mother shook her head and muttered something under her breath. The next 2 days moved slowly, like the world was giving Leela space to understand her own strength. Her family barely spoke to her. They didn't yell. They didn't argue. They simply acted like she wasn't there. It was a quiet kind of punishment, the same old silence she had grown up with, but this time it didn't pierce her the way it once did. Instead of shrinking, she felt herself becoming clearer, steadier, as if each hour was carving a new shape inside her. On the morning of the concert, she woke up early. The sunlight fell across her room in soft golden lines, warming the floor, touching her desk, climbing the edges of her mirror. She stood there for a long moment, taking in the quiet. This was supposed to be just another day, but for her, it felt like a quiet turning point, a small doorway she had to walk through alone. She dressed slowly, choosing simple clothes that made her feel comfortable. Her hands didn't tremble, but her breath felt deep, almost heavy with anticipation. She looked at herself in the mirror again, noticing how different she felt from the girl who once waited for others to make her choices. That girl used to ask for permission to enjoy things. This version didn't. As she stepped into the hallway, she saw her mother sitting in the living room. Her sister was there too, scrolling on her phone with an irritated expression. The room was tense in a familiar, suffocating way. For a moment, Leela considered walking past them silently, but something inside her told her that silence was no longer her prison. It was her choice. Her mother looked up. Where are you going? Leela met her eyes calmly. To the concert. Her sister snorted. Alone? That's pathetic. The words didn't sting the way they used to. Instead, they floated past her like smoke, visible, but without weight. She realized that insults only cut deeply when you believe them. Now she didn't. Her mother sighed. You're changing too much these days. I don't understand what's gotten into you. Leela's voice was soft. I'm not changing into someone else. I'm becoming myself. There was no dramatic reaction, no loud argument, Just a deep, confused silence, as if the idea of Leela having her own voice didn't fit into the family's old pattern. She didn't wait for permission, didn't wait for understanding. She picked up her small bag, walked to the door, and stepped outside. As soon as she reached the street, she felt lighter. The air felt different, as though the world was larger than she had allowed herself to imagine. She walked to the bus stop, noticing small things she had never paid attention to. A child chasing a balloon, a shop owner sweeping the sidewalk, a bird perched lazily on a railing. Life was everywhere, moving brightly, and for once, she felt part of it. On the bus, she found a window seat and watched the city pass by. Her thoughts began to drift toward the concert itself. The music, the lights, the crowd, the feeling of standing in a place she had dreamed of for years. She felt nervous but also excited, like she was carrying both fear and hope in the same heartbeat. But she didn't run from the feeling. She let it rest inside her. As the bus moved closer to the concert venue, more people began to board. Fans wearing shirts with the artist's name, groups laughing loudly, teenagers holding homemade signs. Leela watched them with quiet curiosity. Everyone seemed so comfortable, so openly joyful. For a moment, she felt a small ache, wondering if she would look out of place among them. But then she thought about her journey, the years of shrinking herself, the ticket taken away, the courage to buy another one, the resolve to come here alone. This wasn't weakness, this was strength, shaped slowly by every quiet moment she had endured. When the bus finally stopped near the venue, she stepped off and felt the sudden wave of excitement in the air. Music played from speakers near the entrance. Lights flashed across banners. People moved in wide streams, laughing, shouting, shining with expectation. And in the middle of all this brightness, Leela walked forward with slow, steady steps. Not quietly, not apologetically, just herself. Tonight wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving herself right. And she felt ready. As Leela walked closer to the venue gates, the sound of the crowd surrounded her like a rising wave. People rushed past her with bright faces and excited voices, holding drinks, waving tickets, taking pictures. For a moment, she felt small, like a quiet dot in a fast-moving world. But then she reminded herself that this night wasn't a competition of loudness. It was a promise she had made to her own heart. She reached the entrance line and took a deep breath. The air smelled of popcorn, warm metal, and a hint of perfume from the people ahead of her. When it was her turn, she handed her phone to the staff member. The scanner beeped green. The small sound felt like a door unlocking inside her. She stepped forward, almost weightless. Inside, the venue was huge, bigger than anything she had imagined. Bright lights ran across the ceiling like living threads. The stage glowed purple and blue, waiting. People were finding their seats, laughing, settling in. Leela stood still for a moment, taking everything in. She had dreamed of this for so long that her chest tightened with disbelief. She found her seat, far from the stage, but not so far that she couldn't see the lights clearly. Sitting alone felt strange at first. She could feel eyes passing over her, not unkindly, just noticing a girl alone in a sea of groups. But she straightened her shoulders and placed her phone in her lap. Being alone wasn't a weakness. It was a choice she had made with courage. As the venue filled, a girl sitting next to her turned and smiled. "First time here?" Leela nodded. "Yes, it's my second," the girl said brightly. "You picked a good night." Leela smiled back. The simple kindness warmed her more than she expected. She didn't need to become friends with strangers to feel included. Just one moment of human warmth was enough to remind her she belonged in the world. The lights dimmed suddenly. The crowd erupted. Leela felt her heartbeat rise, then settle, then rise again. The stage lights burst open like a blooming sky, and the first note of the music filled the arena. It was louder, richer, deeper than anything she had imagined. The sound washed over her, vibrating through her ribs, settling into her bones. She closed her eyes for just a second. This moment was hers. Not borrowed, not taken. Hers. The artist walked onto the stage, and the crowd exploded with joy. Leela clapped with them, cheered softly, felt her voice join 1,000 others. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't quiet because she felt small. She was quiet because she felt full. The music returned, memories she had forgotten, hopes she had buried, and versions of herself she had hidden away. As the show went on, she realized something surprising. She wasn't thinking about her sister. She wasn't thinking about her mother. She wasn't thinking about the years she had spent shrinking herself. Instead, she was thinking about the beat of the music, the glow of the lights, the warmth gathering in her chest. This was the beginning of a life where she didn't wait for permission to feel joy. At one point, during a slow song, the artist spoke to the audience. "Sometimes," he said, "you have to choose yourself even when it feels lonely. Because if you don't, no one else will know how to love you the way you need." The words hit Leela like a quiet thunder. She felt her throat tighten, and for a second, she covered her mouth to steady her breath. It was as if the entire universe had whispered the message she needed at the exact moment she was ready to hear it. She looked around at the crowd. Thousands of people, each carrying their own stories, heartbreaks, and small victories. And she realized she wasn't alone at all. She was part of a giant river of human emotions, all flowing together towards something bright. When the final song played, the arena lit up like a night sky. Lights moved like falling stars, and the crowd swayed together. Leela stood with them, moving gently, letting the music hold her the way no one had held her in years. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't asking. She was simply living. As the concert ended, the artist bowed, the crowd roared, and the light slowly returned. People began to leave, buzzing with excitement and joy. Leela stayed seated for a few minutes, letting the moment settle in her chest like a seed meant to grow into something strong. She whispered to herself, "I did it." Not loudly, but with a quiet pride that felt bigger than sound. Walking out of the venue, she felt lighter than air. Something had healed. Something had opened, and something powerful had begun inside her. Something she wasn't ready to let go of. Leela's quiet confidence had begun to shift the balance in the family. Mara's carefully maintained image of superiority was showing cracks, and for the first time, Leela felt the satisfaction of subtle, elegant triumph. She no longer needed to force attention or demand recognition. The respect she had long been denied came naturally as people noticed her competence, her warmth, and her quiet charm. During family gatherings, she moved gracefully among relatives, offering genuine compliments and thoughtful conversation. She laughed softly at jokes, listened attentively, and contributed in ways that drew admiration without seeming calculated. Each small interaction, each subtle display of intelligence and kindness, reminded everyone that Leela was no longer the overlooked sister. She had become someone impossible to ignore. Mara noticed the change, of course. Her usual dominance over conversations and events felt challenged. For the first time, she experienced the unease that Leela had felt for years. Every glance she cast at her sister now carried a flicker of anxiety, even if she tried to hide it behind a practiced smile. Leela, ever patient, observed quietly, savoring the moment without a word, understanding that the true power lay in being underestimated. One evening, at a small family gathering, Mara tried to assert her usual authority by organizing a trivia game. She expected to shine, to dominate the room with her knowledge and charm. But Leela was ready. She had spent weeks learning the nuances of Mara's strengths and weaknesses, noting where Mara's confidence outweighed her actual knowledge. As the game began, Mara answered questions quickly, showing off her usual flair. The room watched her, expecting the same pattern they always had. When Leela's turn came, She answered carefully, with clarity and precision. Her contributions were subtle, almost understated, but they drew admiration nonetheless. Eyes that had once overlooked her now lingered, curious and appreciative. Mara faltered on a question she assumed she would know, and Leela offered the answer with calm authority. The reaction was immediate. A ripple of surprise and admiration swept through the room. For the first time, Mara felt the sting of being overshadowed, quietly and effectively. Leela's satisfaction was quiet, measured. She didn't gloat or confront. Instead, she moved through the evening with grace, ensuring everyone saw her kindness, her intelligence, and her poise. Mara tried to reclaim attention, but her attempts fell flat. The children listened with interest to Leela's observations. Adults nodded at her insights, and subtle praise followed her everywhere she went. It was a victory in patience and strategy, one far sweeter than a moment of rash revenge could ever have been. By the end of the evening, Mara left early, muttering excuses, her control slipping. Leela stayed behind, helping children gather their coats, speaking softly and warmly, nurturing bonds that were real and lasting. She understood that this was more than a single triumph. It was a shift in how she was perceived, a reclamation of her place in the family. The quiet satisfaction of justice, measured and elegant, filled her with a warmth she had never known. Alone later that night, Leela reflected on the evening. She realized that true power did not come from confrontation or cruelty, but from subtlety, patience, and intelligence. She had not only regained her dignity, but had taught Mara a lesson in humility, without malice, without spectacle. The family now saw her differently, and she saw herself differently too. Her journey of empowerment was far from over, but she had proven to herself that she could rise above exclusion, favoritism, and humiliation. Leela knew this was only the beginning. Each small victory was a step toward a larger transformation. She was no longer the sister who silently suffered. She had become a woman whose quiet strength could not be denied, whose patience was her greatest weapon, and whose presence now commanded respect effortlessly. Mara's shadow no longer intimidated her. Leela had become her own light. Leela's transformation continued long after the family gatherings. She moved through her days with quiet confidence, no longer defined by Mara's favoritism or by the past humiliations. Every accomplishment, every kind gesture, every moment of attention she earned was a reminder that she had reclaimed her power, not through anger, but through patience, strategy, and self-belief. She began to see the world differently. Small gestures of appreciation, children thanking her for help with homework, friends noticing her growth, relatives seeking her advice, became her real victories. Mara's arrogance and attempts to dominate now seemed hollow, and Leela no longer felt the old fear or bitterness. She understood that true strength lay in building herself up quietly, steadily, without waiting for others' approval. One chilly evening, Leela walked through the neighborhood park, watching families play, dogs run, and couples stroll hand in hand. The crisp air and soft sounds of life brought her a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She thought of Mara, not with hatred, but with understanding. Mara's need to control and be adored had always been born of insecurity. Leela had felt the same fear once, but she had chosen a different path. Empowerment, not destruction. A message from one of her nieces lit up her phone. "Aunt Leela, thank you for helping me with my project. You're the best." Leela smiled softly. These small acknowledgments, the genuine moments of connection, mattered more than any fleeting satisfaction from Mara's discomfort. Love, respect, and trust could not be stolen or faked. They had to be earned, and she had done so beautifully. Back in her apartment, Leela settled into her favorite chair with a warm cup of tea. She reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple concert ticket and the sting of exclusion. That single moment had sparked a chain of growth, strategy, and self-discovery. What had once symbolized humiliation had become a symbol of empowerment. She no longer needed revenge to feel whole. She had proven to herself that her worth was independent of Mara's approval or the family's comparisons. Later, a gentle knock came at her door. One of the children held a colorful drawing she had made for Leela. "I made this for you," the child said shyly. Leela knelt, taking the paper with trembling hands. The simple sketch, filled with love and bright colors, moved her deeply. "Thank you," she whispered. She hugged the child tightly, feeling the genuine affection that could never be manipulated or stolen. Leela realized then that her true victories were not in Mara's discomfort or the subtle shifts in family dynamics. They were in the bonds she nurtured, the respect she earned, and the self-confidence she had cultivated. Mara's favoritism and arrogance no longer held power over her. She had built something stronger, something lasting, rooted in authenticity and love. As she watched the child run back to the living room, Leela whispered to herself, "I am enough. I always was, and now they see it too." The past no longer weighed on her. The future stretched bright and unburdened before her. Mara's shadow had faded, replaced by a strength that was entirely Leela's own. She had achieved victory not through malice, but through courage, patience, and wisdom. In the quiet of her apartment, Leela finally allowed herself to feel complete. The lessons she had learned extended far beyond family dynamics. She now understood that true empowerment came from within, that respect and admiration were earned through authenticity and consistent effort, and that patience could outlast cruelty. Leela's journey had begun with a moment of betrayal, but it had led to a profound personal transformation. She had claimed her place in the world, her dignity, and her voice, and she knew that no one could ever take them from her. With a deep breath, Leela set her tea down and looked out the window at the city lights. She smiled, knowing that life was no longer about proving herself to anyone else. It was about living fully, proudly, and with purpose. The quiet, measured victories had brought her something far greater than any fleeting moment of revenge: freedom, self-worth, and the knowledge that she was truly, undeniably enough.